Value.
Can you please tell us your name?
Kimber Vought, V-O-U-G-H-T.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in outside of Philadelphia, Delaware County, and went to high school at Ridley Park, Pennsylvania. I stopped growing then.
When did you go into the service and how old were you?
When I went in the service?
Yeah.
I enlisted in March of 1942. The Marine Corps had a recruitment officer at our university. I was at George Washington University. And the purpose, the plan was that those of us who were accepted would finish our college courses, and then go on active duty with the Marines and be trained for officers. It didn't work that way ultimately because
What were you doing when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor?
That was a Sunday, and it was a Sunday night, at least when it appeared on radios. We didn't have television, of course. And I was my fraternity, where I lived in Washington, was having its usual Sunday dinners with our dates, and maybe a little dancing to records and stuff. And all of a sudden someone yelled, "Turn on the radio." I turned it on, and this was giving us all the information. And we all kind of looked at each other, and we sort of lost all the glee that we were feeling at the time. And the first thing I guess most of us did was grab a phone wherever we could find one and call our parents. You know, tell them, I don't know what I don't know what. I think we thought we'd say, well, it's too bad, here we go. And that was the way we felt. I guess that's going to end education. But
oh, that must have been
that's
awful.
where I was.
With what unit did you serve?
What kind of what?
What unit did you serve?
I'm sorry.
What unit did
Oh,
you serve?
unit.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. You have to forgive me. My right ear is no good. As I said, I enlisted, but we didn't go on active duty. But when a couple of months after I enlisted, contrary to what the deal was, the Marines decided that they ought to send us to boot camp. And even though we were going to be trained to be officers, they wanted us to go through the same kind of training any men in the Marine Corps. I say men because that's all there were at that time. And so I was called to boot camp on December of ⁴, and I was supposed to be I was supposed to stay in school until I got I was halfway through my senior year. But fortunately, I had taken extra classes. First of all, I stayed in Washington during the summer, took extra classes, had little jobs and that sort of stuff. So when they took me, the Marine Corps, to boot camp, I was able to graduate in absentia in 1943 from GW. Now, what unit I was in, when you're a boot, you're just in a unit of a group of, you're just recruits and nothing. You're not even a Marine yet. So until we finished that, there was no, I think there was a platoon number, but I don't recall it.
Which theater of war were you in?
Well, I was in the Pacific. I guess all the Marines, except for very few, were in the Pacific area. And, but that was a little later after I'd gotten my commission and so forth.
Which battle did you take part in?
Well, after boot camp, after I got my commission in Quantico, I was sent back to Paris as a training officer for about 8 months, something like that. Then I was sent to the Pacific via Camp Pendleton and attached to the 2nd Marine Division. Actually, I was a platoon leader in Charlie Company C, 1st Battalion, 8th Marines, and Marines, whenever you hear 8th Marine, 10th Marine, and whatnot, that's what they mean by regiments. And there's a division. So I was C-18. Tinian operation had just about finished, and we had some cleaning up to do, but that was the first operation and only in combat was Okinawa. And I can tell you about that. That has some interesting things to it. But
I bet it does. What specific details do you remember about the combat, the sights, the sounds, or what you saw?
Well, when I landed on what they call Love Day, not D-Day, because there are a number of operations being planned, and it gets confusing for staff people.
Yeah, of course.
So we landed on Okinawa, believe it or not, April 1st, believe it or not, it was an Easter Sunday, and secondly, April Fool's Day.
Wow.
Well, April 1st.
Yeah.
Well, it was an April Fool joke for the Japanese, because my outfit, the 2nd Division, made a feint landing. They went all the way in, all this bombing and all the a lot of artillery, naval vessels with huge guns firing, and as we got moved in, the Air Force laid down a smoke screen, and then we turned right around and came back to the ship. Meanwhile, the main force, which is 2 other Marine divisions, plus an Army division and a lot of supporting stuff, they were landing on the other side of the island, and they landed without a casualty. And we had some casualties because the kamikaze, that's the Japanese airmen who were giving their lives for their emperor, hit a couple of our ships, and there were some people killed on the day we were making the feint landing. So I heard about every kind of gunfire, and heard it going over my head because they shoot it, you know, as you're going in. So that's my first experience of that. And later I had some more experiences at Okinawa, but that gives you my first day. And after that, we were sent back. Things were going quite well. Japanese were pretty much now in the southern part of the island, and pushing to the north. It was very fast. Well, you know, I'm taking days. I don't mean it was just a cakewalk. But I was not involved in that. They sent us back to Saipan, where our regular camp was. But as soon as we got back there, they took my regiment and sent us back, and we hit a couple of small islands, no resistance, and finally joined the main force in the last several days of the operation. And it was at that time, as I was moving up with my troops, our colonel, the regimental colonel, and his operations officer were just sort of looking over and watching battle going on. General Buckner, who was the commanding general of the whole operation, Army lieutenant general, he came up, and as a matter of fact, he said, well, things look like they're going pretty well. We don't need to, I don't need to stay here. And with that, a bomb dropped right in us, killed him. Never touched our colonel or our operations officer. And I saw them taking the general out on a jeep, you know, on one of these ambulance jeeps. And then our job was to continue on, and that's when I really heard gunfire. And we were moving up and doing very well. I'm not making any contact hand to hand because there was so much artillery. And all of a sudden, something landed, a puff of air, just knocked me over. And 2 men next to me were killed. The bomb dropped, so that that's about as close as I came to getting wiped out in the war. It was pretty hard, but and one other hard thing that kind of upsets me when I think about it. And part of the area we went through, there had been a battle several days before. We were still moving forward, and there were a lot of dead Japanese, and the weather is very warm and sunny at that time, and they were all blown up, you know, swollen up, dead bodies laying all over the place, and a few Americans too. It's a horrible thing to see. But fortunately, we were able to get to the end of our objective and so forth without losing any other men. The 2 men they lost were, this is hard to believe, they were forward observers. They were with the artillery unit, 10th Marines, which is the artillery unit, and they had what they call forward observers with the troops on the front lines. And we would tell them we needed artillery fire in a certain sector, and that's what their job was. And they were close to me because I was the commanding officer of my platoon. We were moving in a platoon-like formation. And the 2 guys who were forward observers were technically not infantry people, but they were up there. They were always in the front because that's the only way you could pick out or get word back. Don't forget there weren't any kind of, the only thing you had by way of communications, you had wire, maybe I'd have a messenger type, that's what it was called, have the wire and unravel it as they go along, kind of a telephone service. But you didn't do that until after things were settled. But the best way to communicate with your company commander was through your messenger. Messenger would say that, you know, or he would be required to go to the captain, get orders, what they wanted us to do. So the 2 guys who were killed were there for a real purpose, and I didn't have forward observers for a while.
Would you consider that the worst moment? Would you consider that the worst moment when you were there?
Do I think it was that worth that?
The worst?
Huh?
The worst moment?
Oh, the worst moment. At the time, I didn't have time to think.
Yeah.
And it was worse, yes. I would say the real worst moment was when I saw the dead bodies as we advanced. I felt bad. I didn't know these 2 fellows had actually been killed. I knew they were banged up badly, shrapnel, and had to carry them back. And but I think seeing all those dead bodies blown up, and you say to yourself, you know, this is tough, but you got to remember we were pretty much winning the war by then, and that was that seemed to be the motivating factor. Yeah, you felt bad, and you couldn't help it. I guess the worst moment is why them and not me, or why not the 3 of us? And
well, you're a very brave man. Can you talk about the chaos of the war and like the enemy? Did you know where they were at all times?
At the end of the war, I went in with the occupation forces. We landed at Nagasaki. Of course, obviously after the bomb had been dropped, the A-bomb. And our job was to, at least my unit's job was to move down to a town called Kumamoto, this is all in Kyushu, the southern island in the Japanese islands. And then we were there about 2-3 weeks, and yeah, I should mention when we landed at Nagasaki, course, this is going to be the first time we've had contact with civilians, except on some of the small islands there were civilians. Anyhow, our orders were no mixing with the civilians, and we went ashore. The troops were lined up. Everybody was behaving. The Japanese were looking at us. There were quite a few little kids. Everybody was glum. And one of my Marines took out a candy bar. You see it even happening today. And the kids ran over, and boy, by then, the kids were climbing all over everybody. They wanted candy. The Japanese, you could just see them, fresh and drop. And then, of course, as I say, we went down. Ultimately, I ended up in the town of Kagoshima, which is the southernmost tip of Kyushu, and there we had the task of providing a force just for purposes of maintaining calm, and there was no reason why there would be any problem. Japanese were pretty much accepting us. And as a matter of fact, we started having some of our people, some of the Japanese became do errands and so forth for the Marines. But an interesting thing that I had in Kagoshima as a commanding officer, and I was for my company, I was the senior officer by then, but I was only a first lieutenant. And I would go aboard a small ship that's bringing people back from, well, it's not then Indochina and so forth, for repatriation. And I had a sergeant who had learned to speak Japanese quite fluently. It's amazing. He was taught at Quantico. And he would carry on, pave the way for me, so to speak. But it was very interesting because I would go and meet the captain. I had to make sure that all the people had shots and so forth, so they weren't bringing in any kind. And I had a medical officer with me, a Navy man, and a sergeant who spoke all the Japanese, and he kept them. It was quite revealing, and eventually, you get talking just like you do with other human beings. And it was a nice experience, and certainly a lot better than fighting.
Definitely. Did you always know what your objective was?
The objective? Absolutely. The objective in the Pacific was just the same as in the European theater, that is to defeat the enemy. Now, our objectives per se, that is for each unit, was to win the battle that you're fighting. But I must say that when we trained on Saipan, we didn't just go out and do exercises, mock battles and that sort of thing. We learned a lot of things about how to treat civilians and whatnot. Now, on the islands, there were civilians, but very few. But all of that training was for the invasion of Japan, and we didn't have to do that because of the A-bomb.
Since the Battle of Okinawa happened near the end of World War II, did you have any idea that it was nearing its end?
Did I have what?
Did you have any idea that the war
had ended?
Okinawa was nearing its end?
No. As I said, when we went back to Saipan after completing the Okinawa operation, we were definitely preparing for the invasion of Japan. Now, we didn't know where, when, or what, but there was a lot of heavy training. It only went on for a few weeks. And then Saipan is the island right next to Tinian, and Tinian, that's where I originally started. Tinian had the big air base, and they had those bombers, B-22s, 27s, I guess. But they were flying out and bombing Japan. But we knew that the next move, I knew my division. Matter of fact, I know exactly where we were going to land in the invasion. And that's when we learned about the atomic bomb, first at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And obviously we were, we were pleased. Matter of fact, I have a newspaper from Washington newspapers, the day of the surrender, which has big headlines on it.
Oh. How did you feel towards the Japanese?
Well, you know, while you're out there, we didn't have very nice names for Japanese. Things may have changed now, but we call them gooks. We call them all sorts of things. And even after the island of Saipan was secured and Tinian, we would occasionally find them holed up still. And we'd take them out, but we didn't, I mean, we'd just take them out and turn them over to the military, or to the MPs. So did we have a feeling as one human being to another? Probably not, but not a blood, you know, not a evil thought. You know, I'm going to just kill them and not kill them and then ask questions later. None of that stuff. They were very. The military was very good in training us to do our job, and when we ran across civilians, how to handle it. As a matter of fact, at the end of the war, at the end of the Tinian campaign, there was a compound where what civilians were in Saipan, or in Tinian, were living in that compound. And we had to, once a month, I went down to do duty as an officer, just to but they were, you know, they were just farmers and they were just good people. And we didn't have any, any urge to wreak havoc on those people. Quite the contrary. And I didn't see this, but this is something that people don't realize. This happened before I was there. But in Saipan, as they were coming to the close of the operation, up along the upper parts of Saipan were clusters of communities, and women were throwing their babies over cliffs down into the rocks, killing them, and then jumping in after them. And that was because the Japanese told them we were going to be raping them or whatever, and that's the only reason why they did it. And that was for those who were there, that is, the Marines that were there, had to, you know, stop it. It was shocking to everybody, and that's all they talked about for a couple of weeks. But finally, won the trust of the people. But that was a miserable thing to see throw babies over a cliff and jump after them. And they're all women and babies, obviously. The Japanese men were, I don't know what they were doing.
Wow.
You know.
What did you miss most from home while you were overseas?
Well, I guess my my then fiance. The United States was so organized, so, you know, all involved in this sort of thing, that somehow or other, even my men, I never saw anybody really experience any real bad homesickness or anything like that. I wanted to get back and be a civilian and start making a life of myself, but I would say that it was, let's get this over with as soon as we can and get home. I think that's probably what it was.
After the war was over, was it easy to put the whole experience behind you?
For a while, well, yes and no. By the time I left Japan to go back home, my my battalion commander, whom I used to ride, we used to kid and sing songs about his college and all that stuff, not nice songs. And he said he wanted to put my name in for active duty in the Marines. I said, no thanks, no thanks. So, but when I got home, after it was about, I was still in the active reserves. By that I mean the ready reserves. In other words, I was subject to call it, and then of course Korea hit. And I thought for sure I was going to be called, but fortunately I didn't. Then I took a number of courses every year, you know, correspondence courses, went to camp for 2 weeks, stayed in the reserves, and finally in 1962 I was had been pretty busy in my profession, and I had to cease that, but I had the rank of major when I finally left the service, the Marines, for good, so to speak.
What do you think that we should remember about World War II?
What we could have what?
What we should remember about World War II?
What ended? I think what we did.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very difficult thing for people to understand today. And there's no doubt we are the first to use the atomic bomb. Nobody even knew about it in the United States, except a few high-level people. But there's no doubt, a couple of months ago, I have, you know, we always keep contacts with Marines or even anybody who was a buddy who is in the service, and I got an email which was about that thick, and what it was a copy that had just been of a review of what the Department of Defense, well, it didn't have a Department of Defense, but what the Army and the Navy was planning on the invasion of Japan. And there's no doubt about it, it's mentioned right in there. My outfit would have been one of the first, you know, in the first wave, first or second wave, and that isn't good. I mean, even the fifth wave's not a good wave to be in when you're landing in a country of that size, large land masses of that type. Marines are not used to fighting, but they certainly learned how to. And of course, today it's so different. No, I think that was the right thing. Japanese were horribly knocked out by our bombs, just our regular bombs. But they were still eager to fight, at least the kamikazes were, that type of thing, and we would have had a lot of trouble. And if we had to take it that way, I think we probably had a lot of trouble maintaining order. But the way it ended is the way it, in my judgment, was meant to be, and I think that was good. A lot of people don't agree with me, but this is what, 60-some years later? 70, I guess.
Well, thank you very much for fighting for us, and you're a very brave man, and I appreciate you taking the time out to do this with us.
Oh, thank you. It's been my pleasure, believe me, and it's been kind of fun renewing these things, but I hope someday we all learn that war doesn't solve everything. There are other ways of going about it, but nobody wants my view on that one, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Vought. Is there anything else you want to add, or any stories or anything?
Well, I'd like to add that story about coming back.
Sure. Why don't you tell her about it? You know, we'll just cut it in later.
All right.
So you can just go ahead and talk to you.
Yeah.
So explain to her what you're telling me, starting from the beginning, and we'll go through that again.
When I was ordered back to the States, I reported to the commanding officer at Camp Pendleton, California. I was assigned to what they call, I was just assigned to a staff that's just sort of put together for repatriating or sending officers. Now this is officers. I did not have any enlisted men under my responsibility at that time. Anyhow, I got orders after I'd been at Pendleton for about 3 days. I managed to get, I never got up to Los Angeles on my own to party or anything, but we had our parties around the local areas of California, Oceanside, so forth. Anyhow, I got orders to take 420 enlisted Marines back to the East Coast. These are guys that had been overseas for a year and a half, and on any of these battles we were talking about. And they were, I was to take them, start at, I think the town, what they called it was actually Pendleton's ranch house to Los Angeles. And that was just all beat up trains we got on and went up. And the plan was that as soon as we got to Los Angeles, the troops were immediately to go on another train, which would take them back to Perryville, Maryland, where the Navy had an installation. I got into Los Angeles at 10 in the morning, had these 420 Marines, which incidentally my brother was one of them. He had been a sergeant, or was a sergeant in the, I guess he was a platoon sergeant in the 10th Regiment, which is an artillery of my division. But anyhow, he was there and a couple of other sergeants that were going back too. So I sort of designated them to assist me in keeping control over these 400. Anyhow, when we got into Los Angeles, an SPC policeman had some sort of message to deliver to me, and the message was, we can't take you back, you can't load up until 10 o'clock tonight. Now it's 10 o'clock in the morning, Los Angeles time. I have 420 Marines who haven't been in the United States for God knows how long. And I had to do something to keep them under control for 12 hours. Well, you know, the first thing I thought was, I got the sergeants, I said, hey, look, we got to somehow or other get these guys. It was easy then, they were just waiting to be told what to do. I said, let's tell them that they're going to have to spend 12 hours here, but no one's to leave the station. I said with my fingers crossed. And it would be serious if they did. Well, anyhow, when we dismissed them so they could go and just wander around the station for 12 hours, everyone out of that station before you could even sneeze. And about 10, and I told them what time we should be available to go aboard the train. When they came back, God bless them, they were all wandering back. I don't believe there was one sober Marine in that group. And some were so bad, his buddy was carrying them. And my sergeants were there. They had been out and had a few too, but they knew that they had some responsibility. So what my idea was, you put them on a car, close the doors on each end, put a bunch in another car. These were old Pullman cars. This was only our train. This was not a civilian loaded train. Matter of fact, I had my own kitchen car from which I had to order produce and whatnot to feed them. But anyhow, they kept following me, you know. They're just having fun. They just thought it was fun. I'd say, you guys stay here. We go. Next one I turn around, there's a couple of them following me. And I said, I told you to stay there. Well, the conductor, there's a conductor that travels for a certain distance and another one gets on. But anyhow, he said to me, if you don't get these people settled down, I'm going to pull this train out of here without them. Which, of course, created a little bit of maybe bravado on my part. So if you do, I'll shoot you. And I'm not kidding. I said, these guys have been over here out of the country. They have really suffered a lot, and they're being human. And we're going to get them on, and we'll worry about counting them. And I had the tickets. Imagine 400 tickets for each guy. And we'll do that. We get them in this train, and I don't care if it takes us 5 hours to get them in this train. We're going to get them in the train, then we're going to go. Well, we finally got them in. We took off. The next very, very important incident, and very important to me, very interesting, is that as we, it took about 4 days, believe it or not, to go cross country in the train, because every time the super chief, that was the fancy car train of that time, was going out to Los Angeles, we'd have to pull off the tracks, and I had to order produce, and okay, but they all settled down. They played cards. We're not going to go and have any kind of exercises or anything. Well, the night before we were to arrive in Maryland, I was asleep, and I heard somebody talking. I opened my eyes, and I saw a lantern shining in my face, and this voice said, "Are you in charge of this train?" He said, "Yes, I am." "Who are you?" He said, "Well, we'd like you to come with us to the train master, and the yard master rather." The train was obviously stopped in the train yard. So I went over with him. Meanwhile, I could hear the guys putting the shades up. They had the shades down, looking out, and there was always a bar at the railroad yard, and they'd see this flashing light. Anyhow, they stayed aboard because, first of all, they couldn't get off because, the train comes into a platform. Anyhow, I went to the train master, sat there. There were 2 or 3 people from the railroad. Said, "Lieutenant, the problem is you got an old car that has all the luggage in it. These guys all had sea bags, and we'd pile them in this car." He said, "It's an old car. It's too high. And I think it's around Pittsburgh or someplace. You go through a tunnel, and this car won't get through the tunnel." He said, "You got to get your men out, unload the car, and put it in another car." And I said, "There's no way I'm going to get those guys up." I said, "We'll lose complete control of these fellas if we start that. And besides, why should they have to do all the work and move their luggage? You have people." "Oh, don't tell me." He got very little snotty. But anyhow, we sat there kind of trying to outdo the other. And he said to me, "By the way," he said, "what did you say your name is?" And I said, "Vought, Kimber Vought." He said, "Do you know a man is known as K.R. Vought?" I said, I know him. He's my grandfather." The guy said, "He is." My granddad was a railroader from day one. He said, and my granddad was a division superintendent at that time, not out there. He said, "Oh, we know your grandfather. We served under him. He was really a tough guy." And then we got talking about family. Finally, the train master said, "Maybe we could work this out." They said, "If I unhook the car, leave it here until I can get some of my men, and we'll transfer it and hook it on to the train coming in tomorrow. Is that all right?" I said, "Absolutely." And that's the way we solved that one. We got into Perryville, and there it was. Little things like that happen. You never expect it.
Yeah.
I did fail to tell you that in Los Angeles, when the Marines all came back helping each other, and they do, Marines stick together, I found out the next day, after I was able to count them, that 2 guys were missing. And I thought, oh boy, I had to report that. Well, I finally got word that those 2 guys had not even gone out of the terminal and got misinformation. There was another train the next day coming behind mine. And they got on that one by mistake because it was practically morning. So, you know, is there a lesson there?
Mr. Vought, you brought some stuff with us. You want to share that with us?
Well, there's a book here, by the way, if you ever have a chance. I don't know, I guess they still publish this. This is the history of the 2nd Marine Division.
Okay, yeah.
You'd be interested in
Absolutely.
that. It's everything from World War II. It's not back, you know, World War I. That's well, the 2nd Division didn't exist in World War I.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, and this is where this is just just like a high school graduation or a college graduation yearbook of our officers class at Quantico.
Do you want to? Can you hold that up for us? A couple pictures. Maybe?
Yeah, well, sure.
Andy,
Sure.
can you zoom in on that? He's going to talk about it.
Yeah.
Like go in between the shots of him holding it, and then Andy's going to zoom in on it.
Let me see if I can get. I'll tell you what I'd like to do. Is take me a minute, but right here. Okay, now here's a pic. How do you want it? About like that?
Yeah, I think that. Can you get in on that, Andy? Yeah.
Here's a picture of the observation post that my regimental commander and his operations officer and General Buckner had come in, and it's just a few minutes after this picture was taken, the shell dropped, blew up, and killed General Buckner, the only general that was killed in World War II. Which one is General Buckner? I have to look at this way, but here's my glasses. General Wallace was my regimental commander. Here it is. This is Colonel Wallace here, my regimental commander. We call him Bull, Bull Wallace. To the left of him would be this gentleman, and he is he was a major. I used to know him, Major Chamberlain, who was the operations officer for the regiment, and this is General Buckner. And he was the words he said was. He was observing. See, we had just, my regiment had just started forward in combat. And he was observing. He just came up. It's normal for a general to do. Well, not so normal, being that open about it. But anyhow, he said, well, things are looking pretty good. I guess there's no need for me here. And it was right after that, bang, he was killed. I rushed him. I happened to be coming up the road, a little sandy road like up that led into this, and they had to put him in get a ambulance jeep, but he was dead. He was killed. Now there are a lot of, you know, there was a picture here, but I don't know if I can find it. Let's see. No. I told you about, well, yeah, I will show you this. My comments about the atomic bomb. Well, this is just a scene from Japan where we were going to make our landing. And you see it, right? What it does is show what you have to understand, that this thing with machine gunners in this can just get the crossfire, get it, you know, going this way, and just catch us as we're coming through. Things like that, but this is a good book, particularly for a Marine that was in the division. The only thing I have to say about this, did you, Let me get back to the class. Do you ever hear of Sterling Hayden? Did any of you ever hear?
No, not Sterling Hayden, no.
Sterling Hayden was a movie star. Yeah. He was kind of a B star in those days. He was married to Madeleine Carroll. Now, Madeleine Carroll was a great French actress. And Sterling was in my class. There's a picture of him here someplace. And yeah, here it is. You can't tell it, but that's Sterling Hayden there. And the two of us happened to get extra acquainted because he went to, this is an officer school now, we would get the day off, the weekend off. But they had, the only way we could get up there is by train, and there wasn't good train service, or by cab, which was sort of illegal because of rationing and all that. Nevertheless, we found a cab that secretly picked us up, the two of us, take us to the railroad station in Washington. Then I would take off from there, and he'd go on up to New York to be with Madeleine Carroll. So that used to be fun. He was dropped behind the enemy lines in. I forget. It wasn't in. He was dropped behind the enemy lines in Europe. I think he had a special designation. But anyhow, people like that. And my wife insisted that I show you this. And the only why I told you, I stayed in the reserves, which means that I could. I did training every summer. And this is probably the big, there were two big things. I was sent to the Naval War College in Newport, Rhode Island for training and staff reviewing and so forth. And then this is a picture which says, now I'm going to read it to you. It says, attending a general critique session for a huge Marine Corps Reserve field tracking exercise in which he participated, Major Kimber Vought is my address. As a member of the 4th Staff Group Ground, organized Marine Corps Reserve, Major Vought participated in the planning and execution of Operation Nellie, the largest combined air-ground training exercise for reservists ever held at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, involving more than 2,000 reservists from both air and ground outfits in 10 different states. The huge, what has he got? Oh, the huge mock war was one of the most successful training operations on record for Marine Corps reservists. I wonder who was writing that one. But there it is. That's me. And when I was 62, I guess I was 20, I guess I was about 25, maybe 26, something like that. So.
It's a nice picture. Yeah, it looks a great picture.
Yeah, that's what's nice about what you all are doing. As I said, there are a lot of bloodier battles than what or even a bloody battle. Okinawa was a bloody battle, and I was fortunate not to have to be in all of it. And but there were other things that were happening to those of us who were overseas, or to those of us when we came back, like the trip on the train.
Yeah.
And those bring back nice, fond memories. And I'll shut up after I tell you about 20 years ago, I got a telephone call from a town in Ohio, I forget, I think it was Toledo, and it was my runner. When we were in Okinawa, remember I told you about the runner that takes, he was in the 2nd Marine Division Association, and so was I, and he saw my name. He called me, and I still call him now. He's been operated on a couple of times with some problems, and another time one of my sergeants called me. He was in California, and last time I talked with him, it's got to be 15 years ago now. He had something like, he got married, had something like 8 children. 3 of them were doctors, 1 a lawyer, the others something, all which he is so proud, and I was proud too, because he was he came from a family that during the Depression years when we were fighting the war, and he was able to raise a family and get them educated like that. This says a lot. So.
That's great.
About ready to get your bus home.
Yeah, getting ready to get out of here. Is there anything else you'd like to add, or?
No. I think,
okay.
As I said, I wandered on here a bit, but
no, that's fantastic. That's
I.
what we like. More than that.